Now, what we're going to talk about today is if we're adding integers, there are certain rules. Okay? Rule number one is if I take a positive plus a positive will equal a positive. So if I have positive 4 plus positive 5, that will equal a positive 9. Lily?
Why does that work after R positive and negative?
Positive and negative counting numbers. Okay, now, so when you're adding two positives, you simply add the two numbers together and keep the positive sign. Now, obviously, we don't have to write the positive sign. Okay, I just did it in this particular case because I wanted to make sure you understood that, I'm adding two positives together. You do not have to add you do not have to put the positive sign on any of those numbers. Okay? Okay. Have I covered that rule yet? Okay, the only thing I've covered is what you've been doing since you were in kindergarten. Two positives added together make a positive. Okay? The next one. When you add two negatives together, you get a negative answer. Okay? So when you're adding two negative numbers, you simply add the two numbers together and keep the negative sign with your answer. Okay, so that's rule number 2. Rule number 3 is the hardest of the 3 rules. There's only 3 of them, but it is the hardest one. Rule number 3 okay, I have negative 5 plus a positive 4, and that equals a negative 1. The rule is this: when adding a positive and a negative, you subtract the absolute value of each number, then keep the sign of the larger absolute value. Okay, now, we need to talk about absolute value, obviously. We've talked about it before, okay? But absolute value is where you're involved here, okay? So let's talk about it underneath this problem. Absolute value is this. It is the distance a number is from 0 on the number line. Lily? I'm going to explain it here in a second. I'm going to explain it here in a second. I'm just writing the rules down. I'm explaining that one in several different things right now. If we're starting with what is absolute value, okay? The absolute value is the distance a number is from 0 on the number line. So, for example, if I had this number line here and there's 0, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and I have -1, -2, -3, -4. Okay? If I look at -4, how many units does it take to get back to 0 from -4? If you look at a number line, how many units, how many spaces does it take to get back to 0? Somebody raise your hand and tell me if you think you get it. Tayshawn? 4. In other words, for me to go from -4, right here back to 0. 1, 2, 3, 4. It is 4 units from 0. So, the absolute value then, and the absolute value is noted by these two parallel lines right here. These two lines tell me that we want to take the absolute value. The absolute value of -4 then is 4. Because that's how many units -4 is from 0. Now, the same is true down here. How many units does it take to go from +4 back to 0? How many, Tristan? 4. So that tells me the absolute value of 4 is 4. So you will notice that they both have the same absolute value. Okay, because they're both 4 units from 0. Okay, that's their absolute values. Okay, that's the first thing we have to understand is we're taking their absolute values. Okay, so back to our original problem of -5 plus 4. Okay, negative and a positive, then I have to take the absolute value of -5. What is the absolute value of -5? 5. And I have to subtract the absolute value of 4. What is the absolute value of 4? No, I did not say the opposite. It is 4. So 5 minus 4 is 1. Now, which number has the larger absolute value? -5 or 4? -5. Therefore, my answer is -1. Okay? The other way to look at this is this way. -5 I can represent by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 negatives. Plus 4, I can represent 4 by 1, 2, 3, 4 positives. And I am adding those two things together. Well, a negative and a positive cancel each other out. Okay, and I am left then with that one negative sign. That's why it's -1. That is what is happening with the rule. Okay, let's say, though, I switched the problem. Let's say I said the problem was 5 plus -4. Okay, let's say it's 5 plus -4. Jesse, you getting all this? You are? Because I'm going to take up notes today, and it's going to be a quiz grade. So, oh, yeah. Yeah, because I see a lot of people just sitting there like bumps on a log. So we'll take the notes up, and I'll let that be your grade today. 5 plus -4. Once again, I have a positive and a negative. So I have to subtract the larger absolute value. Let me rephrase that. Subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value. Now, so in this particular case, then I have this. The absolute value of 5 is 5 minus the absolute value of -4. The absolute value of -4 is what? 4. What is 5 minus 4? 1. Which is the larger absolute value? The positive is. So that's why it is a +1. If we think of this one in terms of the one up above it, that would mean that I have 5 positives and I have 4 negatives, and I'm adding them all together. So once again, positive and negatives cancel each other out, leaving me with one positive. That's why it is +1. Lily?
What if it's like -5 plus +5?
Okay. How many negatives do you have? How many positive signs do you have? So what happens when all those cancel each other out? Yeah, leaves you with 0. And the same is true with the rule. If you take the absolute value of 5 and subtract the absolute value of if you take the absolute value of -5, which is 5, and you subtract the absolute value of +5, which is 5, you have 5 minus 5, which is 0. And that's why it's 0. Okay, let's look at another example. -9 plus 2. Okay, another way that you can look at this for the positive and negative adding together, another way to look at it is this way. If I came to Sean's house one day and stole $9 out of his little piggy bank, okay, I stole $9 out of his little piggy bank, then I felt guilty about it, so I came back the next day and gave him $2 back. Okay, did Tayshawn lose or gain money? He lost money. Okay, how much money did he lose? $7. Okay, so the answer to this problem then is -7. Okay, now here's why it is -7 mathematically. Okay, I have a negative and a positive, so I have to take their absolute values. Okay, the absolute value of -9 is 9, minus the absolute value of 2, which is 2. 9 minus 2 is 7. The larger absolute value is our negative sign. Therefore, we must bring it down into our answer. And that's why the answer is -7 mathematically. Yes, we figured it up with using the money instance, or you could do it also this way. I have 9 negative signs. I have 2 positive signs. Negative cancels a positive, negative cancels a positive, and that leaves me then with 7 negative signs. Okay? The other way to look at it is look at it on a number line. If I have a number line and here is 0, okay, and if I look at the problem, -9 plus 2. Well, negative, if I start at 0, right here, and I move negative, do I move left or right? Left. I move left 9 units. So that would be -9. So I'm right here now. Now I have to go back to the right 2 units for the +2. Okay, thus putting me at -7. Okay, so there's 3 different ways that you can look at, because this is the ones that usually the people have the most trouble with the positive and the negative adding together. Most people can remember that you add 2 positives together, you get a positive answer. You just add them up. Most people can figure out, I mean, if I go to Tayshawn's house and break his little piggy bank open, and I take $5 from him, then I go back the next day and take $6 more from him, he's going to know real quick that he's going to be feeling pretty negative because he just lost $11. Okay? That's not hard to figure out. If I came to Tayshawn and I said, "Hey, Tayshawn, you're a great guy, here's $5, and I came back the next day, "Hey, you're even a better guy today, here's $6, Tayshawn finds it real easy to figure out that he just gained $11. He's pretty positive about that. Okay? Providing I didn't do all the other stuff to him. Okay? All right, so it's usually when you have a positive and negative number that most people struggle. Okay? So I'm going to give you 3 problems here. I want you to do these 3 problems in your notes. There's the 3 problems. -25 plus 9, -18 plus the parentheses are there just to set the negative sign off. Okay? Doesn't mean to multiply, anything like that. It just means there's a negative here, negative sign, it's not subtraction. You have -18 plus -4, and then you have -5 plus 19. Okay, do those problems. I'll give you a couple of minutes, and then we'll talk about them. All right. Let's look at the first one. -25 plus 9. Okay, -25 plus 9. Who has an answer? Jesse, glad to see you're busy working. What? What'd you say? Go ahead and say what you said, because it was correct. Yeah, it's -16. -16 is the correct answer. Now, on that one, we have a positive and a negative, so we take their absolute values and subtract their absolute values. 25 minus 9 is 16. The larger absolute value is negative, so we got negative 16. Remember, subtract absolute values. Okay? Then the larger absolute values sign. Okay, so Colton, what'd you get for negative 18 plus negative 4? Yes, negative 22. Okay, it's negative because I have two negative signs, so I just take 18 plus 4, which is 22, and keep the negative sign. Okay, now, negative 5 plus 19. Brandon? 14. That is correct. You take the absolute value of the two numbers. That gives me 19 minus 5. So I take the larger absolute value and subtract the smaller absolute value from it. That would be 14. The larger absolute value is positive. Therefore, it must be a positive answer. Okay? All right. Here's three more. Hush. Well, considering this is a 9, what do you think that is? Well, never mind. If you can't read that's a 9, then I'll start grading your paper and reading it like I want to read it. The first one is 22 plus negative 96 for those of us that can't read. Next one is 24 plus 32. Next one's 112 plus negative 48. All right. First one, 22 plus negative 96. Who has an answer? Christina. Negative what? 74? Yes, negative 74. Okay. Once again, we have a positive and a negative, so we have to subtract their absolute values. That'd be 96 minus 22, which is 74, and we bring the larger absolute value, which is 96, sign that goes with that number, into our answer. Okay? Next one, Jacob. 24 plus 32. Yes, positive 56. Okay? Obviously, you just add those two numbers up, okay, because they're two positives. Now, the last one, 112 plus negative 48. 112 plus negative 48. Who has an answer for me? Cameron. Positive 64. That is correct. Okay? Now, same thing here. Okay? You take their absolute values and subtract. So 112 minus 48 be 64. The larger absolute value is positive, so we bring that into our answer. Okay? Now, what happens if we have three numbers? Nothing. It still do the same thing. Let's say you had that right there. They'll usually put parentheses around it. Negative 7 plus positive 4 plus negative 3. Okay, well, Negative 7 plus a positive 4, I have to do the absolute value, and so that's 7 minus 4. 7 minus 4 is 3, plus negative 3, and it's negative 3 is, because of this, it's negative 3. Now I have negative 3 plus negative 3, both of them are negative, so I just add the two numbers, 6, and it would be negative 6. Take Sean? No, no. I mean, you could add these two together first because of the commutative property and have negative 7 plus negative 3, which is negative 10. But then you would have to take negative 10 plus a positive 4. Like that, and that still is going to come out to be negative 6 either way. Jesse, you have something to add to it? You sure? Because I could give you and Quade an opportunity to come up here and give us a project and explain it to us for your grade. Do I need to have you do that? Okay. All right, now, the last part of the lesson wants you to put the less than, greater than, or equal sign in the blank. Okay? Now, before I can do that, though, I must do what it says in the problem. In other words, this right here means the absolute value. What is the absolute value of negative 5? 5. So this is really what they're asking is, which is greater, the absolute value of 5 or just 4? Well, that's greater. Okay? So that's why it would be greater, because if you take the absolute value of negative 5, that's going to be greater than just 4. Okay? Just by their values. Gabby?
If anything, like, say it could have been the absolute value of 3, would it still have been greater?
No. Because once you do, if it was the absolute value of negative 3 versus 4, well, the absolute value of negative 3 is 3, so which is larger, 3 or 4? 4 is, so it'd have to be this.
You kind of treat it like a regular number.
Yeah. Lily? Yep. Any other questions? Okay, for homework tonight, you're going to do 6.2, 6 through 10, 15 through 32, and then 34 through 40. 6.2, 6 through 10, 15 through 32, and 34 through 40. We still have about 5 minutes left in class. I want you to go ahead and get started on that. 6 through 10, 15 through 32, 34 through 40. You must write the original problem, and you must show all of your work. Your answers go below your problem.